This is what I want to say first is that what in the Infinity War was going on in Loki, episode 5? Everybody was just disappearing, almost kind of like turning into dust, but let's just switch it and turn them into noodles, basically.
Hmm.
People just dying left and right. Well, getting erased. But I do want to say this. We didn't end up uploading the clip of our theory, kind of. Like our other theory, where we kept rambling on until we thought, hey, episode 5 could be about this. Where we thought that they were going to end up in the void because of what we had read the article on, where the pruning kind of works the same way as the timeline exploding, to where everyone would just end up in the void, right? Because the
Hmm.
TVA is destroyed, blah, 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 you're at the end of time or whatever. We got that wrong, but when we further explained it, we said, oh, this is what's happened, and Loki was going to be given a mission to kind of bring everybody back to the TVA, right?
Yeah.
The mission was that he was going to bring everybody back to the TVA. So we got that part right. The only part we didn't get right is how he would get everybody back to the TVA. Because we said that he was going to get instructions from whoever. I think we said instructions from Sylvie because she had King. He remains temp pad, so she was able to kind of like know what to do in case the timeline exploded or the TVA exploded. She would just know where to go. And she still did have it, and she still ended up using it in episode 5. But it ended up going a completely different way. Everybody ended up in their exact timelines, but Sylvie was the only one who ended up not back in her original timeline. Because remember, she's a Loki at the end of the day. She wasn't
Now
working at McDonald's.
that's where my theory from last episode kind of plays in about her using the tempad last second.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because the blast did affect them in some way. It didn't kill all of them. It just sent them back to their
Original realities.
timeline.
Yeah.
Right. So whether it was a branch timeline or part of the main timeline, they went back to the timelines they were pulled from originally. So that my theory about her, quickly realizing what's going on and then just kind of stepping out the temp pad selfishly, um, kind of is what I think plays in well to this because she's also the only one who remembered who Loki was, obviously, because she had the temp pad. She used it to get out. She went back to her branch reality. She was like, this obviously failed, so I'm just going to go back to what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and maybe or maybe not that she saw everybody spaghettify or maybe disappear to their realities, and she was just like, screw that. Who knows? Who knows how that went down? But I do think she used the temp pad last second to save herself. Um,
Yeah.
and and then this episode kind of proves that she would do something like that anyways because she did that
When the other one
when
was failing.
yeah, when the timeline she went to go live in started spaghettifying, and
Is that what we're calling it? We're calling it the spaghettifying effect?
yeah, there was spaghettifying.
Yeah, I feel like she did the same exact thing too because like you said, it's almost kind of like they foreshadowed what she had done in that very moment. But we also actually not we. You also called that Loki is now able to control his time slipping because he learned how to
Mhm.
time slip to certain spots. Right? It was kind of like a cliche way on how he kind of figured it out, where it was like, just think about it, just think and believe. But you were right that he was eventually going to be able to learn how to time slip. It's kind of crazy though. What I thought was also crazy is where these people actually ended up being in their original realities. Casey was a freaking fugitive from Alcatraz. Nobody expected him to be a fugitive from Alcatraz.
But not only that, he was a real life fugitive, or at least he was based off of a real life fugitive because um in I don't remember the year, but when Alcatraz was active as a prison, there was these guys that escaped, and they used paper mache like dummies, like they made them to kind of like replace them in their beds,
Mm-hmm.
and then crawled through like walls and tunnels and to where they were on the beach to a boat. But the thing is, that story ended where they don't know what happened to those guys. They don't know if they drowned or if their boat failed on them or if they had made it out. So it was kind of like the how last season they said Loki was DB Cooper, the guy that jumped out of the plane and no one knows who he was or what happened to him afterwards. He just robbed the plane and
Mm-hmm.
then jumped out. So it's kind of like that. It's pretty funny like they're using these real life like people, but that their lives ended so mysteriously, or at least as we know of, and they're kind of like rewriting them in the show. I think it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of
Very
unique as
clever.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Also, another one was it was expected that Mobius would have a life how he did because his life
mhm.
was in 2022, one of the most recent years that we're living in right now, and he was working at jet skis. B-15, a doctor, which I don't know how I could have thought she was a doctor. Probably because she's just caring about people, and doctors are supposed to care for people. Um, and then Ouroboros, who actually was an author, that kind of played in a little bit because he wrote the TVA guidebook and he was trying to sell his science fiction and stories. I thought that was a pretty nice touch. But he was like a failed author. And now in the TVA, he's writing his bestseller,
Hmm.
which is the TVA guidebook. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I find it funny that Ouroboros is in the TVA the most helpful person, and then also in his own branch timeline
He's the most helpful
is
person.
he's the most helpful person. Yeah, I mean, it took him 18 months to figure out a temp pad. I mean, that just tells you his intelligence right there.
Well, because he was also a scientist as well. Because when Loki was
Yeah,
like, "Oh, you're an author," he's like, "I'm doomed," but he was like, "I'm a scientist actually," and he was like, "Oh, thank God."
yeah.
I would have been nervous
So,
too if I was like, "Bro, you're not
but
a scientist."
but still, the era that he was in was like what 1984. So like,
1994.
yeah. So like, you guys understand like with that technology, he was able to create a temp pad.
That only shows like, bro, how smart really is Ouroboros? Like he's actually pretty up there with smartness. I'm not gonna lie, 1994 and you created a temp pad. Let it's a hot take, but could Tony Stark have done that?
I don't know. I mean, his dad did some interesting things too. Remember, he made that hovering car
That
in the
failed
first
though.
Avenger. Yeah, I mean, it failed, but he still created a hovering car of all things. You know what I mean?
True, but that's his dad. We're talking about Tony.
Tony, I think if Tony was born or was older in that era, I think so.
Actually,
I think he would.
wait. That's actually a dumb hot take because at the same time he was given a guidebook.
Actually, yeah,
He was given a guidebook. If
yeah,
Ouroboros created the temp pad without a guidebook, I'd be like, whoa.
yeah. But
So
yeah, that's why I was saying like 18 months, like still, and
18
with
months, yeah.
90s technology,
Mm.
like it wasn't modern day technology. It wasn't technology given from the future. He just gave him a book
It
and
was
was
like,
like,
do it.
"Do it with what you got."
Right.
So
That's still pretty impressive. But
yeah.